The price of the Kyle Connor brick is still going up, and with Kirill Kaprizov and Connor McDavid potentially helping to drive the market, can the Jets afford to bring back their star winger?
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we have some fun stuff to talk about. I want to talk a little bit about some updates on the KFC contract, which continues to be a little bit of a sticking point right now. I think there's a very big narrative here that's starting to form, and it's that the Kyle Connor deal is about to get real expensive. If his agent is trying to model stuff after what McDavid and Kaprizov are about to make it, and don't get me wrong, he's not in that tier of contract, but he's not that far off. It's going to be hefty, man. We are talking a lot more money than I think a lot of us were expecting. So we'll dive into that contract and what it might mean for the Jets for the long term. I also wanted to talk a little bit about NHL 26 ratings for the Jets. We got some of our top player ratings out there in the whole game, and there were also some really funky ones that I think you're going to get a real kick out of. Finally, I also want to talk about the fact that there's hockey back next week. Can you believe it? It is the Prospects Showdown, and for those of you who haven't been keeping up, this is going to be a really cool little exhibition thing that's a bit of a replacement for Penticton, and Winnipeg will be attending in Montreal. But first, let's talk about the KFC brick. So the price is going up, and things are looking very expensive. We don't really know McDavid's contract situation because he's kind of calling the shots. And obviously, he has the chance to be one of the highest paid players in NHL history. But what's interesting with McDavid is that I don't think he's really in a rush to do much. It feels like he's kind of giving the Oilers a bit of a mandate. Either you fix this team heading into next season before I, sign this deal, or I'm kind of thinking about taking my services on the road. Could you imagine if McDavid becomes an unrestricted free agent at the end of his next deal? That would be one of the most unbelievable moments in history. You never see a player of this talent just become a free agent like this. I don't know that we have a precedent for something of this level. So this is going to be one of the most interesting storylines in the whole league this year. Really one of the biggest storylines in NHL history. And sure, maybe the likelihood is that he re-signs with the Oilers. But if things really do go south again this year, what happens? He lost 2 straight cup finals? That's pretty crazy. And the reason I talk about all of this is because McDavid is one of those top tier players, and his extension really sets the market for a lot of other players. One of those guys is going to be Kyle Connor. And I think Connor is certainly a couple tiers below in terms of contract value. When we're looking at the top players right now that are asking for new deals, Kaprizov might be the closest, so to speak, but even Kaprizov is probably a good tier higher. That said, the rumored Kaprizov number is something like 8 years at $16 million per season. $16 million per season. So I know I've been saying that KFC might be a $12 million player. I am starting to wonder if we're talking more in the 13 range. If that's where we're pushing towards, this is starting to get into some really scary cap territory. And look, here's the thing, right? The Jets obviously have room to do all this. It's not like they can't make a contract for KFC happen. But at what point do you realize, maybe this is just not worth the investment? And I don't know. If KFC wants to do a shorter term deal with a higher AAV, I'm not against it. But if he's looking for a long-term deal with a ton of money attached, I don't know if I'm in love with that. I like Connor. I think he's a great player. I think he's obviously one of the most important offensive pieces on this team. But there's also a point at which you start getting into silly money. And even with the cap projected to go up by a lot over the next couple of years, I don't think it's wise for Winnipeg to tie up a ton of money in older players all the time. There's a way to do it efficiently, and I think the Jets have done it pretty well with Hellebuck and Scheifele. But if we're talking 13 mil plus for Connor, and I'm wondering if it's starting to push towards that territory, I just don't know if this is really a market the Jets can play in. Not that they can't do it, but if you start committing this salary, it does not leave you a lot of room the further down the road you go. You've already got a fair bit tied up for a couple of key players. You're going to have quite a few free agents coming up over the next few years, especially some of the younger ones. I have some real reservations about this, man. This could be one of the craziest contract extensions we've ever seen with Winnipeg. I guess the good news is that they've saved a fair bit of money on other deals, especially given the cap situation going forward. But, this is like a new era, man. I don't think I was quite expecting some of these price tags to come through. And Kaprizov in the 16 mil range per season, that is just, I mean, sure, you could argue he's worth it, and I think there's a fair argument for that, especially given the prorated cap adjustments. But holy cow, man! I mean, this is a crap load of money, and Winnipeg isn't one of those teams that has ever played in this sort of price range. They don't go into the 8-digit figure when it comes to salaries. That's not really their pattern, and so. I don't know what to think about all this, man. I look at this and I'm starting to wonder if Winnipeg can actually make this happen. And if they really start to see him pushing for something like 13 and a half plus, I wonder if there's really a way to make this work that doesn't revolve or doesn't involve some sort of a trade. Again, I don't think the Jets would have any intention of doing this. A trade seems like an absolute last resort, especially when you're in the so-called 3-year competitive window. But man, is there a point at which the salary starts to look a little too much for the Jets? My interpretation is that they're willing to give him just about anything he wants within a certain range, but I wonder if there's a limit to that. So, again, we're not looking at him in the Kaprizov tier, but he's not as far off as I think I'd want it to be, especially if we're looking at his point scoring, right? He's almost a 100-point player in the past year or so. That's the kind of guy who commands a ton of money, especially as a UFA, and certainly one of the biggest free agents that would hit the market if he were to test it next year. So this is going to be one of the biggest situations to watch. Kaprizov is very close to signing. That's the rumor. It seems like it's going to happen before October. McDavid is a very different ballgame. We don't know what's happening with that, but I would think Kaprizov is more than enough of a comparable for Kyle to go with his agent and try and negotiate some sort of cash deal. So, yeah, this could be a very wild and woolly situation. And if the Jets start the season without KFC on a new deal, my goodness, is it going to be a very sweaty time all the way to the trade deadline and really the end of the season. Not that I want to over stress this, but I think this is one of the biggest decisions the franchise could ever make. And there's a lot riding on this. This really does have the potential to reshape how Winnipeg approaches the next several years of Jets hockey. So keep an eye on this one. Me, I've talked about it a lot. You know how I feel about giving players in KFC sort of role in stature this amount of cash. And it's going to be the norm going forward for a lot of teams. I just wonder if that can be Winnipeg. So here we go. We are launching into a new era of salary structure in Winnipeg. It's going to be a very interesting next few years for the Jets. I have no idea what their plans are for free agency. This is going to be really the first test of how Winnipeg sees itself in the new era of the NHL. But curious to know how much money you think KFC should get. Are you sweating this contract? Do you feel like it's going to be fine? What is your impression of the price tag that's being rumored out there? Let me know in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. In just a moment, I also wanted to talk a little bit about some more fun stuff. NHL 26 is coming out, and the Winnipeg Jets have some really high player ratings, probably the highest that we have ever seen in this game, and really this franchise for Winnipeg. But some of the ratings are really weird and surprising. Want to dive into which ones really stood out and which ones I definitely agree with in just a moment. But before we do, did want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NFL season is finally here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. We just saw the Chargers defeat the Chiefs, and if you had a $5 bet on that game, you could have won huge. Whether you think Justin Herbert or Patrick Mahomes might be fighting for the MVP trophy this year, or maybe you think it's Saquon's time. He's been a great standout player for several years now and is doing just crazy things for the Eagles. Or maybe you feel like it's Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson again. It's going to be a fun season, but the only way that you can get in on the action is to download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are chatting about some fun stuff and some crazy stuff for the Jets. The Kyle Connor contract is still a thing, but a couple of days ago we also had a very interesting little nugget dropped by Electronic Arts of all companies. The Jets have player ratings in NHL 26, and I would argue that this is probably the best contemporary team rating that we've ever seen for Winnipeg. Quite a few really surprising ones, too. Also, some positions that don't really make sense for some of these players, especially given where they're actually playing right now. But, of course, NHL is going to try and account for all of the positions they've played and where they are technically rostered, I guess, in the system. But looking at NHL 26's ratings, Winnipeg actually has 5 guys in the top 100 of the game's NHL ratings. At number 10, we have Connor Hellebuyck with a 94 overall. I think he is one of the highest rated, if not the highest rated goalie in the game. That's really awesome. A 94 rating for a goalie, especially for a Jets goalie, is just insanity, right? Never in my life did I think Hellebuyck would be at this level. He's always been really good, but we are talking, historically good the past couple of years. The only thing that has really held him back is just the playoff success. And if he can finally turn that around at some point over the next couple of seasons, already I have him as a Hall of Famer. I really don't think it's arguable that he'll get in there. He's got multiple Vezinas. He's won a Jennings a couple of times. He's got himself an Art Ross, or not an Art Ross. He's got the MVP trophy, of course. And so it's just, I feel like it's a matter of time before, something finally gives for him to make it into the Hall. I think his name's already there. It's just he wants that playoff success to really solidify his legacy and his position, and to finally make it towards that truly legacy level that I think a lot of people are expecting of him. So hopefully it's this year, or at least sometime in the next couple of seasons. I don't know how many more years of him playing at this level we'll have, but seeing a 94 rated Connor Hellebuyck in NHL, even if I'm not personally playing the game, that is just outstanding. Funny enough, we were just talking about Kyle Connor as well, and you're going to get a real kick out of this. His ranking is number 27. Reminds you of a certain other Jet swinger who wore number 27. But 27, Kyle Connor, 92 overall rating. That's really high. That's probably the highest I think I've seen Connor over the last several years. Usually he's in the high 80s range. 92 rating for Connor. Feels pretty fair, though. He was pretty darn elite last year. And right behind him at 30th overall is Mark Scheifele with a 91. Scheifele, we've always like seen this version of him where when he's really dedicated and driven, he truly is one of the best centers out there. It's just getting him to really buy in that at times has been a little bit of a challenge. But, I think that these are fun ratings. I think if you're looking to build your team in the career mode or whatever, obviously having a top line with those guys is going to be great. And I just hope that they continue to play at an elite level. I feel fairly certain Connor's coming back on a huge deal. So if he can continue to play like a 92 rated player, that would be fantastic for Winnipeg's foreseeable future. On defense, you finally crack the list here at 37 overall. Josh Morrissey, 90 rating. This, to me, already is just too low. If we're looking at guys with the 90 ratings with the Jets, he should be not far off of Hellebuyck. I'd have him at a 92. I think he is, a guy who's been fighting for a Norris recently, one of the best defenders in the league, one of the most fun players the Jets have had in recent memory. I think he should actually be above a 90. I know I'm biased, but Morrissey is very clearly a guy who, for the past couple of years, has been an out-and-out Norris candidate, really improving so much of his offensive game and also continuing to be pretty noticeably strong in the defensive department too, even if it's maybe not the thing that he's best known for. Now, here's where the ratings get very, very funky. At 99th overall, we have Neil Pionk at an 87. This one's interesting because the partner that you would expect to have this rating, Dylan Sandberg, is ranked 239th overall in the game with an 84 rating. Now, this is how I know the league and really the game development team doesn't understand what makes a great defender. Sandberg, for me, should be 87. Pionk would be more in the 85 range to me. I think he's certainly, a guy who's very solid, but like Sandberg to me is the one who's been doing so much of the work to allow Pionk to be more offensively ambitious, right? Dylan is truly one of the most elite shutdown defenders, and even if you kept Pionk at the same rating, just give Sandberg the 87. He also deserves it. That pairing really thrives off of the work that he does, and Pionk, where he can kind of start to roam and be that offensive threat, has really benefited overall. I think you've seen Pionk's game really expand alongside Sandberg, and Sandberg is just an elite shutdown guy. So a little surprised that he is ranked this highly over Sandberg, and Sandberg is just disrespected, but it is what it is, not shocking. Next up, though, 137th overall, we've got Gabe Vilardi at an 86. Oddly enough, I both feel like I agree slightly with 86, but also does feel a little low. Maybe closer to an 88 for me. Now, I know the 5v5 performance looked a little up and down just because I think the top line with Vilardi hasn't always been a perfect fit necessarily. It's not been the cleanest. But I don't know. Vilardi feels more like an 88 to me. He's really good. He's a great shooter. One of the most skilled net front threats. But maybe the rest of his game isn't quite at the level of some of these other players. So maybe it's fair. A bit of a funky one for me. But, 86 is not so bad. And at his age, it also gives his player in-game room to develop and grow to a higher rating, which they do in the career mode. So maybe that's why they've done that. Lowry is next at 239 overall, tied with Cole Perfetti and DeMelo, Sandberg, and Luke Shen. They're all 84s. And if you told me that Lowry, Perfetti, DeMelo, Sandberg, and Shen would all be rated 84 together, I would have had a lot of question marks. First off, Perfetti... 84 feels fair. I think that's fine. He's listed as a center, as is Vilardi, which is interesting. I know technically they do play that and have played that in the past, but they're wingers right now. So I don't quite know how the positional assignment is handled, but maybe it's just what they're registered as with the NHL's database. Lowry at an 84, I mean, it makes sense. He is one of the best two-way centers, but he just doesn't have the scoring, right? So maybe that's part of the issue. DeMelo, at an 84 feels fair. You already heard me talk about Sandberg. Shen, though, is one of the most interesting ones. 84 for Shen's pretty wild. And what's especially funny is that they gave him 81 speed. I don't know who's watching hockey these days for EA, but I can tell you Shen's not an 81 rated speed skater, right? He's really on the slower side. I'd put him, quite frankly, in the 70s for NHL, but I know that that's not quite how these ratings work. But then you look at Colin Miller at 319th overall. He's an 81 rated, and he has 82 rated speed. Like, how does that figure? I don't know. The NHL coming up with these speed ratings, it seems a little funny. Shen is one of the slowest skaters on the team, as is Perfetti, and Perfetti got an 85. So that's certainly interesting. But yeah, I guess the game has to massage some ratings. They tend to have done this in the past. It's something that they've they've spoken about pretty at length, how they do these ratings, how they try to work some averages out to make sure that things look relatively balanced across the teams. But yeah, I'm saying, like, I might not agree with the ratings, but it is kind of cool to see the Jets rated so highly in NHL. I think the biggest thing is that it also promotes Winnipeg as a team you want to play as in-game. The more people that start using NHL and actually using the Jets, maybe you pick up more fans that way. I always look at, games like this and sort of the old FIFA franchise and Madden and stuff as really good marketing tools for teams and ambassadors for getting, player recognition out there. And the Jets having multiple players in the top 100 and multiple guys in the top 250 is only good news for Winnipeg if you want to get the brand name recognition out there. So congrats to the Jets for some huge rating promotions. This may be the highest rated team that we see for the foreseeable future. So if there was a year that you're trying to play NHL as the Winnipeg Jets, this is probably the year to do it. Let me know your thoughts on those player ratings below, though, and drop them in the comments section or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Finally, closing us out, though, not only is NHL here already, NHL 26, you can download it and play it during early access coming right up, but hockey itself is actually almost back. Next weekend is the Prospects Showdown. I want to chat a little bit about that. I talked about some of the players who are already on the roster, and I want to talk about really what I'm just hoping to see out of this exhibition tournament in just a brief moment. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's episode as we are chatting a little bit about the fact that hockey is almost back. It is next weekend. It is the Prospects Showdown in Montreal. You've got the Habs, the Sens, Toronto, and Winnipeg all putting on a couple of games here, and the Jets will have 2 games during this tournament. They've got one on the 13th at 7 p.m., This will be against Montreal's Prospects, and on the 14th, they'll be taking on the Ottawa Senators. It's part of a double header that Sunday where you've got Toronto and Montreal as the first afternoon game, and then at 7 p.m. you've got Winnipeg and Ottawa squaring off. And I talked about it yesterday. Obviously this tournament is not something where you are looking to read too much into it. I will say the roster selection was relatively interesting. No Lambert, I think, is something to keep an eye on. Was it because they already have him as maybe one of the guys that they're hoping makes the team out of preseason and camp? I don't know. If he's got an injury, that would be a little bit of a concern. But if not, I'm just curious to know why he didn't necessarily make the grade. Shibrakov and Barlow and some other guys, Jaeger, they're all going. So Lambert seems like a pretty noticeable exclusion. Why that is, we'll have to wait and see. But I would think that if you're in this Prospect Showdown, it's because Winnipeg is looking at you more in the Moose sense. And maybe that's not really how it should be judged, but that's just sort of the impression that I would get here. But yeah, the Jets are fielding a pretty fun group. What I've thought about this Jets pipeline and what Will Scouch of Scouching has said about this team before is that given where the Jets draft, they get really good value out of their picks. Angle, I think, is interesting. Domedian, not in this tournament, but another guy that I think would be a good player to watch down the road. Salomonson's going to be a beast and is, obviously participating. Jaeger, well, he doesn't really count just because, Rucker was taken with the Jets pick that year and they got traded. But I will say they were taken in the same year. So I guess you could kind of say they're sort of in that tier of player. But of course, you'll maybe look more at the Owen Martins, maybe the Jacob Julians. There are some interesting names on this roster and some really good value. And so what I'm hoping to see is just guys who look like they're ready for pro duty. I think not only would it be awesome to have the Moose be elite this year, but really for the Jets, we are kind of coming to a point in the very near future where the team is already one of the oldest rosters in the league, which means it's time to start turning over some spots to the youth. And I do wonder if after this year, maybe that starts to happen. I don't know. Winnipeg has traditionally been a very vet-heavy team. I get a lot of pushback from some of my friends talking about it because they're like, the transition's not coming. The Jets are going to be old. It's going to be an Islander situation. And like in my head and maybe even in my heart, I can't say that I'm disagreeing here. It would track a lot with the Jets' behavior in the past. I try to be optimistic about this, though. I hope that this is kind of the start over the next few years of more and more youth making the team. It feels like Winnipeg's drafting MO has really been to find guys who have solid NHL floors. Maybe they don't have the most elite talent, but given where the Jets are picking, they have a very projectable set of tools that look well modeled and well fit to like a middle six or bottom six role. Yes, it might just be depth players, but you know what? Those are not always easy to find at good levels that bring a higher level of finishing talent and play driving ability, right? The Jets have usually had lots of bottom six grinders, but maybe not dudes who can put the puck away all that frequently. With the Jets' top six kind of being a little topsy turvy, having more talented depth that can supplement that offense and help give you a more balanced four line grouping, even if you don't have the world's most elite franchise talent on every line, I think could give Winnipeg an interesting advantage and a way to potentially roll their lines against top matchups elsewhere. So, this for me is just a cool opportunity, right? Hockey's finally coming back. We're going to see some Jets youth this year. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of them, and I don't know that they're going to play very many games, but I am hopeful that we are starting to near that point. Again, it's probably not something that I should really expect or even hope for, but at this point, you know what? I will take just about anything. Winnipeg used to claim that they were a draft and develop team. I guess they still kind of do, but like we all know that the development part has been maybe not as productive for the Jets franchise as we'd like. I'm hoping that over the next few years, that begins to change. Get the kids in, help raise this playoff ceiling because we know what this core does in the postseason. As constructed, it's just not good enough yet. So if you can find guys internally that can help you build out that group and then maybe give you some insight as to what you trade or try to assign and bring in here, maybe that'll put this team on a better track to go for a deeper playoff run. But curious to know what you're looking for out of this Prospect Showdown. Drop your excitement or lack of excitement in the comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Next week, we are going to go back to a daily schedule. If you can believe it, we are finally starting to head to that point. Over the weekend, I will probably have, and this is next weekend, not this weekend, but next weekend, I'll probably do a couple of YouTube shorts with some quick hits from the games, maybe some brief shorts on some of the prospects and how each one of them did. And then the following week, we will have a little bit more in-depth coverage of what we saw during some of these games. So stay tuned for that. Going to be a great time. I'm finally excited to have some Jets hockey return, and I hope that it is a productive season for Winnipeg. But for tonight's episode, that's all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.